So the big question I want to ask is whether cannabis, if it does get rescheduled or possibly descheduled completely, Ben, does safe banking even matter anymore? Hey, everyone. Welcome to our latest Traded Black podcast. Thanks for checking in. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Whew. Are we going to see potentially cannabis rescheduled at some point in 2023? Well, some of the momentum building this week. Let's find out. Bring in the gents. Anthony Verrill, millennial entrepreneur and TDR host. Good to see you, sir. Hope you had a good week.
It was a good week. I'd be lying if I was saying it wasn't the same old stuff that we've been looking at before. I've heard this before, but I'm starting to get optimistic. I'm going
I
to
think we
stop being
all
the
are.
contrarian. I'm going to stop being the contrarian in the room, and
Yeah.
maybe start to lighten up a little bit.
Benjamin A. Smith, lead financial writer, TDR. What do you think of this? This is interesting. Yes, a little bit of momentum building.
Yeah, I'm sort of a natural contrarian and skeptic by nature. I don't know if it comes out in the podcast, but I was actually pretty encouraged that at least we got some movement, and I could start to see the seeds of something happening here. So we'll get into it, but yeah, it was a good week overall.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly top line as to why there's, I guess, some optimism as to why people are feeling this something could happen. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, basically has announced that it plans to present President Joe Biden with the federal cannabis scheduling decision this year. This is the first concrete indication of when possible rescheduling ruling is coming. So the big question I want to ask is whether cannabis, if it does get rescheduled or possibly descheduled completely, Ben, does safe banking even matter anymore?
Well, that's a very good question. I think to answer the first one, I think safe banking still does matter, but rescheduling matters more. If we put this in layman's
100%.
terms, if this was like a Richter scale, for example, that everyone knows, I would characterize safe banking as like maybe a 5 or 6 on the Richter scale, and rescheduling would be like an 8 or 9. Right, and if it's
That
a
big,
flat out
huh?
deschedule where they take it off the schedule list, completely, which is very unlikely, but if they do, that would be like a Richter scale 10. The fact that we got some concrete, a timeline from Becerra was encouraging. It should happen this year, although I'd caveat that, we've kind of heard this before, and he did say hopefully, so it wasn't like a guarantee that's going to happen this year. But it looks like that decision is coming. TerrAscend executive chairman Jason Wild said, he's heard from contacts on Capitol Hill that, basically the decision is sort of filed away, and that, it could be ready, and they're just sort of waiting on timing, or it would infer that they're waiting on timing. So it looks to me that, a decision is coming. And if we get to schedule 3 or more, as we've talked about before, the 280E requirement would be a huge weight if that was no longer required off the earnings of the financial results of these companies. And then, in terms of normalization, I think that's where the big, lift would be here. That safe banking would just be, a small return to normalization, or a small advance towards that. A descheduling to schedule 3 or higher would be a huge lift for normalization, more than safe banking. That's why I think this is actually
Yeah.
a more important catalyst than the prior. So I'm encouraged. We shall see, good volume on Friday, and, wait and see mode right now.
Anthony, 8 to 9 on the Richter scale. If this gets rescheduled, would you put that same number attached to
Can I
it?
just say that I love when Ben gets bullish, because
That doesn't happen very often.
no, and I respect your opinion to the point that when you're getting bullish, I pay fucking attention to it.
Right.
So I mean, it's I'm with Ben. Descheduling, rescheduling, it sends us where we need to go. I mean, I see 280E as just being a formality, and kind of like the icing on the cake in the event that we get descheduling, rescheduling.
Mhm.
I mean, the volume was there. I mean, MSOs traded 5.7 million shares yesterday,
Yeah.
last week. And I mean, it's good. I mean, I'd be lying if I was saying that we haven't been here before. When we've started to hear inklings of positive momentum and language coming out of Washington, and then just to take 2 steps back. But Biden might be getting smart. Someone might be in Biden's ear saying, look, you don't have a lot of cards to play here.
Yeah.
This is one that you can play. This is one that's going to resonate, and it's going to be looked at as a win. If they are looking at that like that, it probably gets done within the next year. And yes, I mean, I'd say it's an absolute 10 if cannabis gets completely descheduled versus rescheduled.
Well, we're already talking in rumors about the end of this calendar year. So you're
Yeah,
talking 6 months, and it's that has a different sound to it versus a year, don't you think?
yeah, yeah. 6 months would be that's I don't even I don't want to get too excited, but yeah, I mean that would be something to finally get over that hurdle and to finally have this conversation just put to bed and then watch these companies grow fundamentally into really what they should be,
Yeah.
and watch the industry grow into where it can go without the handcuffs on. That is 280 and these heinous schedules for cannabis. Yeah, that'd be amazing to happen within the next 6 months.
I think
If that
there'd
were
still
to
be some, time lag in terms of
Yeah, yeah,
implementation. The DEA would still have to accept that recommendation, and they would still have to make, if they do
yeah,
accept it, a whole bunch of administration changes to actually bring that to light. So it's not like, if the decision happens, say in November, and it's announced that a recommendation to Schedule 3, that's going to happen right away. But if the DEA accepts this, and we go through all that process, the normalization of this industry is going to take a huge step. And to me, I'm almost like not even looking at safe banking as much anymore. Yes, it helps the cost of capital. Yes, it may facilitate uplistings. It may facilitate credit card transactions. We're not sure about that yet. But this would be, in terms of normalization, this would be a huge, huge. I mean, just 280E itself, to get that
yeah.
off the books and the requirements for the for the big MSOs. I mean, that would make most of them free cash flow positive, and quite a lot of them net income positive, assuming that they don't have a lot of large write downs still to go on their books. So, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think 280 completely just takes the gloves off. I mean, 280 finally might solve the dislocation between the fundamentals of these companies and the capital market valuations.
yeah.
That's really where we need to get to.
Do you think if 280E were to go away, there'd be any kind of chance that the government would implement a new tax, and a tax that would actually fall more so on the consumer versus the actual companies? Like, they're gonna be
Have
taxed on the product. What
have
are
you
your thoughts?
seen have you seen the taxes that are implied on consumers?
How much is it?
I mean, it's egregious in California. It's somewhere between, I don't know the exact number, but depending where, it's between 40 and 60%.
Yeah,
The taxes are nuts. Taxes in Florida are crazy too. There are heavy taxes that are implied on the for there are heavy taxes implied on the consumer at a state level.
yeah.
But yes, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. That's actually a very good point that I don't think a lot of people have thought about. If 280E gets dropped, is there something else that comes into place? Which, yes, there could be some sort of federal tax that gets placed on it, but it is probably in no way, shape, or form going to be as restrictive as what 280 is doing right now to these companies.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll get replaced. It'll probably get replaced with an excise tax, or
Yeah.
something will replace
Excise.
it, but it
Yeah.
will only be partial, and it's definitely going to help the earnings quality of the MSOs. I'm convinced.
How big
And
is
there's actually a really good graphic too, circulating on Twitter. I think it was by Graham Farrar of Glasshouse, and it showed the taxes of various substances like tobacco and wine, and I think beer. And it's like there's only a few pennies on wine of tax, and on cigarettes, it's a little bit higher, but on cannabis, it was way more taxed on
I
a
saw that.
percentage basis
Yeah.
than all these other substances. So, the tax burden is already very high in this industry. So it's got to come down in some form.
Well, there's a great example. If you're taxed that much, but yet the industry is still growing rapidly, like, how much does the black market, have an impact on the industry in the US?
Oh,
Is it
an immense amount. I
it
mean,
is
an immense amount. Like the black market in California, the black market
well,
in
it's
New
black
York.
market. Yeah,
I mean, the black market in Miami is massive in Florida. I mean, I see products that are both counterfeit and legit from companies that only exist in California in Miami,
yeah.
packaged CPGs. Like you couldn't tell the difference. They've got the California stickers on them and everything.
Oh,
The black market is thriving in the United States. But what I'm hoping that happens, and to be honest, I know we all have our opinions about Kevin Sabat, but this is something that I wish that he would actually do. I think that there needs to be a consumer education initiative that goes coast to coast that educates consumers on the pitfalls of purchasing cannabis on the black market.
maybe that's
Um,
the right question I needed to ask.
yeah.
What are
So
pitfalls? Go ahead.
it's I mean it's cannabis is bought by weight. So you want the bud to be as dense and as heavy as possible. People in the black market, not saying they all do it. There probably are some people that ethically practice business in the black market, but cannabis is sprayed. Cannabis is moldy. Cannabis has pests on it. Cannabis is sprayed with pesticides. That's not regulated. Me personally, as a cannabis consumer, granted, there's going to be some people out there that say, sure, other cannabis companies that are regulated are using certain degree of pesticides. However, the flower is then irradiated and then tested, so it's clean once it goes into the sales channels. I won't smoke black market cannabis anymore. I won't ingest or
Really?
inhale. No, I mean, you don't know if it's got pesticides on it. You don't know
Huh.
what's gone on with it. Why am I going to do that and take the risk when I can go buy the same thing from the store? That's
Yep.
regulated, that's tested, and that's legal.
Yeah.
I'm already sacrificing my health to a certain degree by smoking.
Makes sense.
I'm not going to amplify that by potentially having some sort of unknown carcinogen on that flower when I smoke it.
That makes sense. Bless you, by the way,
Yeah.
Ben. That's interesting. I was actually in Boston this week talking to the MaryMed crew, and they're just in New York recently, and they were just laughing because there's all these illegal dispensaries everywhere. They don't have the proper, like, sticker on the front window that justifies, like, them having a legal license, and at the top of the window is like a convenience store sign,
They're all
and
bodegas.
all
They're
everywhere.
all bodegas. But I mean, New York though, that system is another.
What a shit show.
It's I forget his name, Ruben, whatever, who was one of the top guys at the OCM. Actually stepped down this week and resigned.
Wow.
So hopefully they get that cleaned up soon. But I mean, the black market is probably what the black market looks like. What I saw in Toronto pre-legalization. And I mean, in Toronto, you guys had dispensaries all over the place
Oh, they
that
were
were just
everywhere.
in plain sight,
I was
completely
at this pub one
operating.
time, and I was across the
Yeah,
street at a black market dispensary. I could not believe the traffic flowing in and out of there over an hour span.
it blew my fucking mind. In 2016, 2016 was the first time that I'll never forget this. 2016 was the first time that I ever went to Canada. Went to Vancouver. This was when cannabis just started getting hot. In Vancouver, there was a store literally called Weeds. Giant, right. It
Only in
was right off,
Vancouver.
yeah, right off Cole Harbor. So Berger and I land in Vancouver. Obviously, the first place that we want to go is a cannabis dispensary before
Yeah.
checking into our hotel. So we go straight to the dispensary. I'd never seen a legal or illegal cannabis dispensary before in my life. We pull up in our Uber, we hop out, and I look and I'm just floored. It says Weeds. There's weed everywhere. It smells like cannabis. And as soon as we get out of the car, I'll never forget this. 3 police cars just drive casually past, like nothing is going on. And I'm sitting here looking around and thinking to myself, I'm like, what is
Yeah.
this? Like, this isn't real life. We walk in, they've got everything: flour, concentrates, you can smoke in the
Yeah.
shop, edibles, completely fully functioning black market cannabis dispensary in a very nice neighborhood, just there, like a convenience store. New
BC's a
York right
different
now,
place.
yeah, New York right now though is the same way. They're on every corner in Manhattan and
Yeah.
Brooklyn,
Yeah. Yeah, we
thriving.
saw that.
Yeah.
Good stuff, right, Ben?
Yeah, it's great. The New York, it does kind of, it is reminiscent of that, what's happening in New York
Yeah.
and what happened in Vancouver. And, I hope that gets cleaned up because it's not really fair for anybody. And I echo Anthony's statements. I won't even, buy black market weed anymore or whatever. I mean, it's loaded with pesticides, heavy metals, and, it's not fair to the legal operators, right? So why have
Yeah.
a legal market if it's, very accessible to illegal players who can just, pop open?
Yeah. Let's shift north of the border into Canada and the Canadian darling. I'm sure some of our viewers are going to love this story that we're talking about. High Tide, the Canadian darling that we touched on, announced their Q2 2023 financial results, and they were impressive. The company achieved its 13th straight quarter of positive adjusted EBITDA, representing a 174% increase year over year and 20% sequentially. It was driven by significant cost reductions in general and administration's expenses. They also increased its market share to 9.5% of the Canadian cannabis retail market outside of Quebec, which is up from 9% in the previous quarter. So same store sales, they've increased by 30% year over year, 1% sequentially. Their flagship dispensary, Canna Cabana, it's now the largest non-franchise cannabis retailer in Canada with 153 locations and has surpassed, get this, 1,040,000 Cabana Club members. So, Ben, we'll start with you. How confident should investors feel based on their latest results?
Well, I like the latest results. The thing I like the most is the market share keeps climbing with this
Yeah,
company, and they keep opening stores. They operate efficiently. Their expenditures and the capital are in control, and they're geared towards the consumer who is fixated on price. So there's very little to like here, not to like here, and it's a good story. It's good to see a Canadian franchise in the cannabis space
yeah,
succeeding,
good
because
point.
we've seen so many disappoint, miss revenue estimates, not become profitable, far away from profitability, and High Tide's almost there. Adjusted EBITDA is there, it's strongly positive. They're going to go to free cash flow this year. At least that's what they're projecting. And if they do, this will be full cycle of success in this market, a really tough market where most people haven't succeeded. So I
Yeah,
congratulate High Tide. This is a really good earnings report, and hopefully they get to that free cash flow number by the end of this year.
tall task to achieve, especially based on the story that you just shared, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I'm rooting for them. I think it bodes well for them that Fire and Flower is in receivership
Yeah,
and failing.
yeah,
I mean, I'd like to see them pick that up if it could, like I said on a past episode, if it could be accretive and make sense. If not, I'm rooting for High Tide that those Fire and Flower assets just kind of crash and burn,
hmm,
and that's just gonna add to their numbers. It's nice to see a company in Canada executing at a high level, gaining market share, achieving profitability very shortly. It's awesome to see. It's a story that I've been following for some time now. I mean, they've surprised a lot of people. I think they're going to continue to surprise people. They're going to continue to grow the business. And I mean, Canada's not a bad market. I mean, Canada is a good market. There's just way too much up there
yeah.
as far as supply goes and as far as retail goes. And High Tide might be that sole beneficiary that becomes the low blows of the cannabis industry, or that
Yeah,
becomes
good point.
one of the shoppers of the cannabis industry. And I'm rooting for them. I'd be a buyer of their stock, even though it did trade down after earnings. It's a very good fundamental story.
Well,
You know
think
what? I
about
will add this too, that I think there's a long-term tailwind in the Canadian market in terms of population growth. Now,
Yeah,
I don't know if people saw this, but Canada officially on the record went over 40 million people. So
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
big.
that's
really.
yeah, it went on the record. Population growth, because of immigration mainly, is expected to grow about 1.5% this year. Somewhere around there. It's expected to grow over a million people.
That's
So
huge.
so this is not a population in retreat. This is a long term. The country is accepting people from all over the world. Some may be into cannabis, some may not be, but population growth is really robust here. And I think if you look out long term, these numbers are only going to go 50 million, 60 million, and beyond, right? So
They
um,
plan to be at 50 million within the next 5 to 7 years. Like
I mean,
that's a
the population of Canada has to explode it, because I remember probably 2017, 2018, just when we were talking about capital markets and stuff with cannabis. I mean, the population number for Canada we always threw out was 32 to 33 million
yeah.
people, and
when
that
I
was
was in
4 or 5
school,
years ago.
grade school, back in like I don't want to show my age, but back in like the late 80s, the population of Canada was the same as what it was in 2017. The problem is
Really?
that yeah, well, not the problem, but the current state of the country is it's become like an aging older country. So they need to fast forward immigration because there are you should see the amount of baby boomers that have left Toronto, especially during COVID. Like imagine being a
They're all
guy
here.
doesn't have well, let's say for example, you have a guy that doesn't have a pension and bought his bungalow home for 100 grand back in the 70s, can now sell it for 1.5 million. And people are
Yeah.
just scattering out of the GTA and in comes immigration, right?
They move
Yeah.
right
But
on down to Hollywood, Florida.
So the main
That's it.
takeaway is where Canada is basically California, and it's going to be,
Yeah,
in probably the next 5 or 7 years, it's going to be the size of California plus a state like Pennsylvania, right? So it's a
yeah,
market that's growing, and High Tide is capitalizing.
yeah. Other news: the NCAA Committee on Competitive Safeguards and medicine, or should say, medical aspects of sports. They've signaled its support for removing cannabis from the association's banned substance list and testing protocols. This is interesting. So, to understand more into detail, in order for cannabis to be removed from the list, each of the three divisional governance bodies of the NCAA needs to introduce and adopt legislation. So, the committee will also then look to seek support from the NCAA Board of Governors to stop testing for cannabis at NCAA championship events while legislative action is considered. So, could we see a day where Jalen Carter can go out and smoke his weed and not get into trouble?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's coming. I mean, I think the NBA set the precedent. The NBA put their neck out there first.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that you're seeing the conversation resonate in college sports. That's very surprising to me. I didn't think that it'd be something that really got into the conversation
me either.
in college sports, but I do think that you're going to see over the next year to 3 years, you see all of the major sports leagues stop testing for cannabis, with probably the exception of like Formula One
It
and
surprises
like
me knowing that cannabis, they say, with the human brain, it's not fully developed until it's 25 years of age. That's the part that,
I was gonna I was gonna say that most of the participants in college sports are even under the legal age of even purchasing marijuana. So that's why I'm very surprised as to why the NCAA is choosing to take up on this.
Well, will they make this
Um,
retroactive to state law in terms of when you can consume it? Right. So
Mhm.
I don't know the answer to that question. So it may not necessarily allow 18 and 19-year-olds. It may allow just people at 21 and older. I'm just throwing that out there, but
yeah, but
that
think
would make
about
more
it. I
sense.
mean, yeah, but think about the college kids. I mean, football, you've got a lot of kids that go early. I mean, basketball are one and done. Those kids are 19 by the time they're leaving school. I don't know the applicability here, but it's good to see. I mean, any conversation around loosening the restrictions around the substance, I think, are a net positive. Whether
Yeah.
it's the NCAA or whether it's the NFL, NBA, etc. The conversation is being had. I think it's a net positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they say, another brick in the wall of Pink Floyd, and I'd love to see
Exactly.
this because when you have like a major sports league, in this case a college body, vouch for the normalization of cannabis, it just creates more upward pressure and less reason to
Yeah.
regulate it and to schedule it. And when the NBA did it, the NFL did it recently. NFL players like Le'Veon Bell are openly saying that they did it. Basically before games. The normalization is just rampant, right? All we need is the politicians to act, and hopefully Becerra, as we talked about earlier, does so this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marshawn Lynch, I think he was saying recently, he was
Marshawn Lynch was saying he used to take a shot of Hennessy before a game.
and was smoking
Um,
weed. I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that
A
guy's
lot of
I mean,
players do.
actually
that's
That was sort of the secret that no one really talks about, the dirty secret. A lot of NFL players smoked weed before games. I don't know, maybe 5 or 10% or more. A lot of them did it for pain relief and for focus. Some people actually just focus better on it, or
yeah.
think that they perform better on it.
Yeah. Let's switch to psychedelics. Isn't it kind of nice, the verticals that we're covering? It's a lot of optimism. We got a big time event this week in Denver. As many as 10,000 estimated people, a lot of them practitioners. The average ticket price is going to be $1,700. So you can imagine the qualified people, as to kind of like what you mentioned a couple weeks ago or last week, Anthony, about how in order for this industry to go to the next level, we got to have qualified people that, are there for a reason and to advance the overall business model of this industry. So saying that, if we've got a room full of practitioners, what can one anticipate that you'll be looking to learn while you're there this upcoming week?
I'm honestly looking forward to having conversations with as many people as I could find. From a practitioner perspective, from an investor perspective,
Yeah.
from a banking perspective, I've got very, very high expectations for MAPS. I haven't been to a psychedelics conference since before COVID,
Yeah.
which I think we were in a very different place. before COVID.
So much different.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear the conversations and hear what people are looking for and hear really why people are there. I really would hope it's not about the money that's to be made. That's usually not a good sign. All things considered, if it's just rampant. Um, I'm very curious to hear the practitioner's angle on the applicability of these
Me too.
therapies and how they plan to implement them in their current practices or get into them moving forward. Very curious to hear about the roadblocks that they think are in place for them starting to implement and put it into their practice, and what they think the long-term viability of this stuff is. I'm very, very curious from a
Yeah.
practitioner perspective to hear what the conversation is.
Well, Ben, you've outlined actually a couple times, just if there potentially could be these phase 3 readouts for MAPS. That would be obviously a big catalyst moment at the actual conference. Also, some news this week. It was announced the partnership Numinus with MAPS that aims to provide practitioners, I guess, with unique experiential opportunity as part of a clinical study focused on MDMA assisted therapy. And man, do we need a lot of therapists right now? So this seems like yet another step in the, I guess, in a big direction for these two companies strengthening their, I guess, relationship with each other.
Absolutely. That was actually my biggest takeaway. It wasn't so much the phase one study itself with MAPS, which
Yeah,
was significant in itself. It was more a signal to me that MAPS and the Numinous MAPS relationship is strengthening. And that's exactly what you want to see if you're an investor of Numinous, because, MAPS is, the gold standard of the industry. It's their data. They have phase three data that they presented, which was positive, add-on data, confirmatory data that they presented in January, and now new data coming out, which, if it's robust and safe, could be the exclamation point on the FDA approval. I mean, we have
yeah,
the TGA in Australia going live with not just MDMA, but psilocybin therapy on July 1st. So we have a tier one nation, a tier one Western nation, actually rolling this out. So if the data is strong from MAPS, it's easy to foresee the FDA sort of following that, especially since there are no, efficacious treatments out there
yeah,
in the medical community right now. So
yeah.
I'm very excited, and it shows a strengthening partnership. Again, that's my biggest takeaway. And who knows, maybe this trial, once it's conducted, is sort of like the basis or the roadmap for what the protocols are for this therapy. And all roads will go through MAPS. So Numinous MAPS getting closer together, I think, is nothing but a good thing.
Here's something to think about too. I actually learned this in a podcast earlier this week with Peyton Nyquist from Numinous. That actually we have the link here in our caption. So if you want to check out that video, click on this link and below in the caption that you can learn more about some of the discussions I had with Peyton. But he was saying, I think it was the exact amount, $19,580 is the average cost to the government for people that suffer from PTSD in America annually. Annually. So that was an eye opener to
Oh,
me. But if you actually, one thing he was stating too with the drug Spravato, currently with the American Medical Association, coverage for that is only the drug. But if and when the FDA does approve MDMA, the new insurance codes with the American Medical Association will not only have coverage for the drug itself, but I think it's up to 80% of the psychedelic assisted therapy, which is everything that you need, pertaining to getting better with this treatment. So to me, that was an eye opener for me learning that.
yeah, that's absolutely
Yeah.
huge. I mean, think about what you just said. If it costs almost 20,000 a year to treat a PTSD patient for the insurance companies, and you have the upcoming PTSD treatment with MDMA that actually can cure the bulk or the majority of patients in one therapeutic session, or within 6 to 8 weeks of a couple sessions, you're talking about a huge savings for the insurance companies. So there's no reason for them not
And
to
that
get on
price
board.
tag for
They're
that
certainly getting on
treatment,
board.
and the treatment, like estimated, it's going to be between $10,000 and $15,000. So at first, when you first glance at it, it's like, whoa, it's a lot of money. But then when you look at the average cost, it's costing the government annually for people with PTSD. And again, he's kind of slated some numbers anywhere between 12 and 14 million people, as many as 3 million in Canada. Staggering number to say the least.
3 million people in Canada potentially have PTSD.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
I know. Like that's
That's 10% of the. That's almost 10% of the population.
But dude, just think about it. Like I was in Boston the other day and I was saying this the other podcast. Like how many stories have you heard this? Like a taxi cab driver, he moved here from Lebanon. He's married. His wife isn't here yet. They're waiting another 6 months. And what's he doing? He's at home consuming a ton of like, substance of whatever he's choosing. And, COVID's definitely peeled off the Band-Aid as to how people are living their lives now. And I do think that working remotely is great, but I also think you got to have a healthy balance of being in person and seeing people because
I think working remotely is terrible.
I don't look. It's
I
important. It's not going away, but I think like anything in life, there needs to be a balance.
Yeah. I mean, that's why. I mean, that's why I said it when we were talking about Peloton. Like, I don't understand anybody that works from home, works out from home, like just stays at home like Monday through Friday. Like, that's not healthy.
No, I
Like
agree.
that's not healthy at all. It's almost like being in a cage.
Well, you have not just COVID, right? But also like the immigration that is flowing into our countries that we talked about, the US as well. A lot of these people are coming from war torn nations, right? Ukraine, Syria, um, you know, Africa, right? So, I mean, the PTSD, I could see the number being that high just because a lot of people have been exposed to that. And the COVID situation has created,
Yeah, good
mental
Is
point.
that
health crisis.
considered PTSD?
I'm not a
Like,
doctor, but let's learn that this week and find out what the
yeah,
proper definition of like PTSD and ask some of those. I think that's actually an important question. I actually, as I've said before, I've lost my father, to dementia 3 months ago. And there's times where, when you lose a parent, you start to think about what your destiny could be. And I was speaking, and I won't say names, but they said that's actually classified in some ways as PTSD because you've been affected. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think some people like there's a misconception that you have to be at war, right? You have to be in the middle, you have to be in trench
Yeah,
warfare to experience it. I think it can be
yeah.
triggered by the classification can be triggered by other things like just like a personal crisis or whatever can trigger that. But it'd be good to get the actual definition from
Yeah. I
Rick or
mean,
some other person.
yeah. When I hear PTSD, like my mind, obviously, like I usually go to extremes, but like I'm thinking of like a trauma surgeon or
yeah.
like somebody that's like a police officer, like running into a shooting, like active service members, um, not like the use cases we're saying it. But I mean, I can kind of still like I got hit I got hit sitting at a traffic light one day by some girl
Yeah.
that went 40 miles per hour into the back of my car when I was like 16. I was fine, but I can still like I still think about it from time to time. Like
Hmm.
I can still like hear it. So like
Well, I think
that's
PTSD really, when people started to learn about it more, where it become more known to society, was definitely paramedics,
yeah.
firefighters, police
Oh yeah.
officers. That's where it started. And I think people relate to PTSD to that. But as we learn more about this industry and the overall people that are affected by it, I think that there's more to it than just that. But
Yeah.
one thing I think that we should definitely ask around when we're at that conference is just who can be affected? Like, what's the proper? We understand the definition, but examples of people that suffer from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talked to the trauma surgeon. That's why I probably said trauma surgeon first. I talked to the trauma surgeon from the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened in Orlando
Mm,
years back because he's actually working with Catherine Walker and Revitalist. He's on their
interesting.
board, and he himself went through ketamine infusions. And I mean, he on
Wow.
a phone call went in like detail on what it was like the night of that shooting, and it was just graphic. He was like it was a war zone in the trauma center. He was like people were just coming in one after the other, just life threatening injuries. He was like everybody that was working that night was like traumatized is an understatement
Wow.
on what they actually experienced.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can
Yeah.
actually say too that I was actually involved in a nightclub shooting probably 2 decades ago or so. So I'm sort of dating myself, but it was a nightclub shooting. It was like an after-hours club, and I was actually kind of in the line of fire as somebody who got shot and
Were you
killed
really?
on a couch. Yeah, it was like somebody shot actually through a dance floor and through like this sidebar area, and there's a person sitting on a couch, and he got his head blown off. So I can't claim to experience it. I haven't had any after effects of that. I haven't had any dreams or anything like that. Didn't really affect me, but SWAT team came in. I'm sure some people were affected by that. So I
Wow.
think maybe something like that would classify as PTSD. But I think there's a misconception that a lot of people think you have to go to war or something like that. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that can cause this sort of acute trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to hear from you. Anthony and I are heading out to Denver this week. We're going to be at the conference. And for those that like the psychedelic industry that we cover, what are a list of questions that you would like us to ask different practitioners, different executives, CEOs? What are things that you want to learn? Leave a comment below and let us know. And we're going to reach out to people and feature that on our next podcast, which should be helpful. Ben, hold the fort down while we head out west. Anthony, safe travels. And I will see you with John Denver, Rocky Mountain High. Here we come, buddy.
I'll see you on Tuesday. I'm hoping the city's got a little bit of a hangover still from the championship last week.
That would have been nice if there was just NBA Finals went a little bit longer. That would have been a blast. But
there's no
well.
PTSD
Nice.
there, right?
Nope.
No. I've come to terms with it. I mean, Joker's the best player on the planet. We got beat by a better team, by a far, far superior athlete.
God, like LeBron just doesn't know how to stay out of the news. I loved what the coach did. Kind of chirped him in the Pat McAfee podcast, but man, it just let it go. Let it go. You're in Europe. Have fun. Let it go.
Yeah. I mean, dude, watching that guy pass, I don't know how he does it.
I know.
It's like a beautiful thing. Like the way that he passes the ball, he finds the open man every time. Every single time.
His family, his brother, his daughter, like it was just such a great story to see.
Yeah. I'm happy for him. I'm not bitter about it. Like it sucks. I would have loved to win the championship again, but I don't mind losing it to someone like that.
Yeah. So Anthony, you're 0 for 2, right? The Panthers didn't come through either, and then you got the Heat. What's going on here? I was hoping
you really. Yeah, I did too. I did too. The Panthers got their fucking ass whooped. I mean, that's
a really good team they played. Very good.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They just got fucking beat.
Yeah, one thing's for sure though. Matthew Tkachuk is like
that
guy could be the face of the NHL. That guy's a stud.
He was a great player, but I think he emerged as like now an elite player.
I couldn't help but agree. What a leader, led on and off the ice.
Will be back. The offense, Vegas's offense looked like, I mean, we all watched the hockey that was on the rink. I mean, it was crazy the way they moved the puck and they were just scoring at will.
Yeah. We're actually going to come up in a couple of podcasts. We're going to have Bruce Linton on again, but I was in Boston, as I said, with the MariMed team. And a couple of years ago, back when they put that whole acreage canopy deal together, I found out that there was a partner of Canaccord Genuity that had a chalet up in Davos, Switzerland when they were there. And that's where Kevin Murphy, who it used to be with Acreage, teamed up with Bruce Linton. And there was like 10 of them staying at a chalet together, and how the two guys basically were laying in a bunk bed and put that whole deal together. And I'm just like, only in cannabis. But we're actually going to like bring Bruce back on and find out how that whole deal went down. But that should be interesting to hear what he has to say. But anyways, gents, Ben, happy Father's Day. And Anthony, I'll probably be saying that to you in the future. But for now, enjoy your weekend. And I'll see you guys next week.
Talk soon, guys.
Thanks,
guys. Take care. What's up, everyone? So what'd you think of the interview? Are there any more questions you want us to ask? Then leave a comment below on information that you want to learn more of. Make sure to share this video with your network and smash that like button. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.